Hey everybody, I want to talk about the Batsuits. I always like talking about Batman and people seem to like listening to it, so let's get this one under our belts. I've done a couple videos before on costumes. I did one on why superheroes wear masks. I did one on Superman's suit and why Superman has trunks over his suit, which was pretty controversial, but if you look, last year they actually brought back the trunks over Superman's suit, which is what I said they needed to do. So I think that came out pretty well. Today I want to compare two versions of the movie Batsuit, and they're both by Christopher Nolan, because I think it's a very interesting case of how we make choices in movies and how people react to those choices. Because people are actually kind of split as to which Batsuit they prefer. You'd think that as the series went on they would get things better, but there's a significant portion of the population who prefers the Batman Begins Batsuit, even though it had an approach that generally is less believable, which I think allows us to go into some interesting things. Now, over time, people make a lot of changes to superhero characters, especially the popular ones, and we end up keeping the things that actually do work better, so the characters generally get more interesting, better to see, more enjoyable to read over time. And you can see that choices that were made with the original Tim Burton Batman movie got carried over to the sequels after Tim Burton left and to the Dark Knight series, because they were really great choices. And the Batman Begins Batsuit borrowed a lot from the Tim Burton Batman suit. And people don't necessarily give it a lot of credit because that suit did a lot of work in bringing Batman's costume to a believable real-world story. Even though the story is whimsical in how it's executed, you still have to make choices that can make people have some sense of plausibility in what they see. And the Burton suits were the first ones to take Batman out of the comics and have him not wear a suit that was made of cloth. This was a big departure from the Adam West series, where if you watched it, you did have to wonder how he was going to fight people and do all these things when he could so easily get shot. So that approach was really pioneered in those movies, and Christopher Nolan kind of took it to the next level. Now, when people talk about the first Nolan Batsuit, they usually say that they like it because he looks like a panther, or because he looks more ferocious, and they use a lot of very aggressive terms. I think that's an example of us accurately recognizing our feelings, but not accurately describing our feelings. We know that we feel better when we look at that first Batsuit, but we don't necessarily know why. Because Batman isn't actually supposed to look like a killer. He's not supposed to frighten you. Batman is actually a hero. Batman's primary goal when you look at him is to make you like him and think he's strong and want to be like him and learn from him. After all, if the goal was to make Batman scary, you might as well cover him in blood or something like that. You have to be careful with not understanding that part, because if you start thinking about Batman needing to be intimidating, that's how you get those weird growly Batman voices that everybody makes fun of. But instead, the key point of the Batsuit, besides hiding his identity and those things, is to make Batman look cool, to make him look strong, to make him look powerful and masculine. And that's the thing that the Batman Begins suit does very well. And that's the thing that the Burton suit did very well also. And the main thing that highlights that is the neck. I've heard a lot of people criticize the neck of the suit because it's very thick and it makes it hard for Batman to move his head. But that neck is there for a reason. They didn't just throw it on there. That neck is there because the size of your neck and your traps is a key indicator of your physical strength. And so having that thick neck made people like Batman and think the Batman was strong as soon as they saw him. And that change was made because they wanted Batman to be able to move his head, which in strict terms is much more believable. If you're going to be fighting crime, you need to be flexible. But in the process of doing that, they actually lost something too. And it shows how you have to be very careful when you make a choice for believability, because believability is always measured by what the audience detects. You do gain in the respect and appreciation from the audience when you show discipline and make believable choices, and that can make up for things being less visually impressive. But you also may not lose as much as you'd think. Even though Batman couldn't move his neck in the Burton Batman movies and in Batman Begins, I never noticed that as a viewer, and I actually never heard anybody comment on that. So you got the benefit, which was Batman looked strong, without the cost. And so in making that change, you don't actually gain much believability in the audience because they weren't watching that to begin with, and you do lose it in sacrificing that muscle in his upper body. And likewise, another way we pick up on somebody's masculinity and strength is in the size of their jaw. When professional athletes use testosterone and other supplements, their jaw gets bigger, just like their shoulders and other muscles. And when you look at the comics and all those other sources, you can see you get a lot of jaw. And so it has the best effect when that part of the mask shows pretty much as much of his jaw as possible. When you cover up parts of his jaw, it makes the lower side of his face look smaller. So when you make choices, the choices that seem to be the most effective are to take things that the audience will find believable, and within that set of options, find the one that also gives you the most extra effect. So all the things that make him look cool, that people won't notice are a problem, are things that you actually should use instead of things that you shouldn't. A great example of that is the bat ears. It gives you a cool silhouette on his head, it makes him recognizable, but if you ever look at fighting or grappling, especially without rules, you really shouldn't have a handle on your head that other people can grab onto and use to control you. But it's another example of something that we don't actually think about so it doesn't bother us, and the filmmaker should actually leave it in there unless or until it becomes a problem. When you go down the suit, you get to the main body, which is where in the Dark Knight movies you had that more flexible bat armor, which makes him look more like a riot cop or something similar, which I think is a good real-world association that people could have. But also, you lose the sense of muscle, and that's another thing that can cost you when people react to somebody. We don't have much natural recognition of body armor as much as we have natural recognition of muscle. So body armor, in order to be effective here, generally should take the shape of the muscles and make the person look muscular. They did that in the Burton Batman movies. He had molded muscle in the first one, and in the second one, when they changed it to look more like armor, they still had the armor follow the general muscle groups on his body. And they had that too in Batman Begins. You can see the chest muscles, you can see the abdominals, and if you think about it, there's really no reason to actually build those things into the armor. It just has a great look. And when you do that, you also have to pay attention to the character's waist. And one change that Nolan made that I never quite understood was that he had the belt line dip down on the suit. Traditionally, when you see Batman, the belt is actually straight across, it's flat. And having a dipping belt line like that can make it look like it's not tied properly, or like you have wider hips. So I don't know what was behind that choice. But if you take a look at this computer rendering of the Dark Knight suit, you can see what a difference it makes if you change some of these things. It's basically the same design that they used in the Dark Knight movies, but he has wider shoulders, a bigger chest. They emphasize his neck and traps more. The armor looks more like his muscles, and the belt line is actually flatter, and I think it has a better effect, at least for me personally. And this gives you a sense of just how many choices there are to make when you create a character like that, or bring a character like that from the comics to the real world. And so many of them can be confusing. Like, for example, I don't know why Batman doesn't have pupils in the comics. It may have something to do with looking cool and not showing your emotional reactions in the same way that we like when people wear sunglasses. It may be that it makes him look more like a predator, because their eyes tend to glow at night. And of course, Batman has a cape, just like Superman has a cape. And capes are always cool, and I'm not sure why that's the case either. It might be that they look like wings, or they make you look larger, I'm not sure. But there's a clear overall lesson here. It's always important to let your instincts be the judge when you make these decisions. And that was one of Tim Burton's great strengths as a director. Even if he made choices that at times were not logical, he had a good sense for what the kids, or perhaps older people watching, generally would and wouldn't find believable. Nolan took a different approach where he chose believability first, and then went for the theatrical or entertaining aspect second, which in a lot of cases had a better result and made the movie hold up to scrutiny much more. But in some of these small ways, may have cost the movie too, and I think that's interesting to look at. Thanks for listening. Click the notification bell if you do want to see more videos, and I'll be back later.